gears coming together.
It's coming together.
He's a pro.
I know, that's like high tech, like running all those things, knowing which camera. Like
We're not pros.
Nope, I ain't a pro.
We're pros at something.
I can do one camera and a microphone.
2 turntables and a microphone. I can do Zoom.
Oh.
I'm a pro at Zoom.
I can log into Zoom.
I'm a Zoom pro. Want to take it from the top?
No, we can cut this in.
All right, go ahead.
So, Jay was born and raised in Watts during the crack epidemic.
It was a crap epidemic.
Jay was born and raised in Watts during the crack epidemic that ravaged South Los Angeles. Although Jamico had given up on life and had repeated 2 grades in school, he was fortunate to have a supportive family and to participate in a mentorship program for young men. When he did not believe in himself, others did. Without mentorship, Jamico would have fallen into the violence that continues to plague South Los Angeles. He excelled academically, graduating summa cum laude, earning degrees from Tuskegee University and Harvard University. He returned to Watts and became a teacher at Markham Middle School and Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall. Jamico taught at Bedford Stuyvesant and Roxbury as well. He's always developed after-school and mentoring programs for young people from infancy to college. As Jay would say, from the cradle to calculus. He went on to bring STEM education programs to students across LAUSD. Due to his efforts, partnering schools have seen dramatic increases in students' math and science scores. In 2016, Jamico became the executive director of Avalon Carver Community Center. Under his leadership, the organization has doubled its size and expanded programs to include an on-site youth-build high school, 150-bed transitional age youth shelter, and prevention and education programs reaching vulnerable youth across Los Angeles County. Jamico is committed to ensuring that youth growing up in South Los Angeles have the same opportunities he did. And additionally, let me get back to my notes. Additionally, Jamico is a Chris Howder black belt and beloved garage guy known for his technical acumen and dominance on the mats. You can find his self-titled jiu-jitsu instructionals on combatbase.com and scientific wrist lock destruction videos on BJJ Fanatics. Jay, welcome to the podcast.
Yay,
Thanks for coming.
Jay!
Yeah, I'll add an intro. When I first met Jay, he was my neighbor, and somehow we ran across, and I always think of, if there's 2 words, warm confidence. It's like I instantly sense a warmth, but a confidence. I'm like, hey, this guy would be perfect for the jiu-jitsu. And then I found out he already was doing jiu-jitsu. And then somehow he ended up in the garage, and it was great, and he's been an asset ever since.
Yeah, and our kids were growing up together,
Yep.
playing in the street, and it was like family, and it is family. So I'm glad you're here, Jay. Thanks for coming.
And I was so bummed when I heard he was moving. It literally depressed me for a month. I was like, oh man, I was hoping that he'd buy the house, like all that stuff. And Jay's like one of those guys, as a lot of people who know me know, I'm kind of an atheist, but when I'm around Jay, I become a real agnostic. The things, it's like whatever it is, the Jay's one of those, what I'm going to call an angel that you can run across in your life and can steer your life in such a better direction. And my life, I dodged a lot of angels when I'd see them, and Jay's a guy that you can't dodge. He presents himself in a way where I feel his message, and that's inclusiveness and hope. And it's a hope that often I don't have. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Jay.
That's humbling. That's humbling. It is humbling. Yeah, my kids always they have 2 Chris's in their life. You know them both. Mm-hmm. And so they would call one their Uncle White Chris and one their Uncle Black Chris. So this is their Uncle Black Chris because he was a black belt. Mm-hmm. And then the African-American Chris, my oldest friend, was the Uncle Chris, the white Uncle Chris, because he was a white belt. So
Blue Chris, though, right?
But he's a blue belt now. He's a Smurf.
so there, but they aged since then, right? You know what I mean? He was a white belt
Aw.
forever, but that was the thing that my kids began to, they see the world through a different lens than our generation did. So to them, this was Uncle Chris. How do we distinguish the black one? You know what I mean? He's got that old black belt, right? That's almost white. So Chris and I, we met actually with our kids playing with our two oldest children, my oldest son, I should say, and his oldest daughter playing in the streets, and we were just always talk politics, and so one day I came home from my first tournament, and I was bummed. I'd lost the tournament. Master Kaike made me compete. I didn't want to compete. He promoted me to blue belt. Maybe the week before, I thought I was coming as white belt. I've been training 9 months. And he said,
hate
"You're
that.
doing a tournament." And I said, "I don't really want to do a tournament. I just came to lose weight." I had gained maybe 40 pounds when my wife got pregnant with Nehemiah. So I started jiu-jitsu as a weight loss venture. And Master Kaike, I couldn't train but maybe 2 days a week. And the competition class was open on Friday. I said, "Can I please come to the competition class?" "No, you're going to get hurt, Jamico. You're going to get hurt." He was really caring, really looked out for me. And finally he took me in and to the class and said, "Okay, I'm gonna let Jamico train. He's a teacher, this and that. He's a nice guy. Don't hurt him." So the group of guys that became my friends were like, "Oh, fresh meat." You know what I mean? And my first time sparring, afterwards, Pedro, Master Kaike's eldest son, he said, "Jamico, you want to compete next week?" And I was like, "You wouldn't even let me in the class." So I fell in love with jiu-jitsu right away. And I came home with my silver medal. I was a 9-month blue belt. I was a 9-month white belt that turned blue belt. Then that week before, Master Kaike said, "Jamico, you signed up for the tournament?" I said, "Yeah, I signed up." And he says, "That's blue belt." I said, "Oh, I'm a white belt." Like he didn't know. And he says, "Bring me a blue belt." "Not anymore." And that's how I got my promotion. Nice. So I competed. I got silver medal. I came home with the silver medal. I was like, "Oh, I lost," And Chris came to the car. "Jay, you train?" And we had already been friends. And I was like, "Yeah, I train." And he was like, "What's wrong?" I was like, "Yeah, I lost this tournament." He's like, "You didn't lose. You got a silver medal." And I was like, "Oh, okay." He was like, "Come by the garage Sunday." And I would see cars on Sunday, but I didn't know anybody was training. So I show up in the garage, and Chris comes out. He puts on his belt. It's almost white. It's weathered, and and I said, "Oh, he's a black belt, right?" You know what I mean? I had no idea. He never said anything. We never talked about jiu-jitsu. And so then he said, "Get down in Jay's guard." I think he threw Scott in my guard, and started training. And I would come and train, every Friday. Rob was such a gift to me. He choked me out every Friday and taught me the back game. And Chris and Melissa, we were already friends and family. Our kids played together. We would always talk. So that was what began my jiu-jitsu journey. So when Matthew was sick, Matthew almost was in the hospital. I couldn't train anymore at Master Kaike's, and funds were low. And Chris was like, "Just come train. Just keep training." I was like, "I don't want to come if I can't." He never would check, and I would try to hand him a couple $. He never paid attention. You know what I mean? And we never had that part of money in our relationship. So I began to train. And one day, I think Rob said, "Jay's not at Kaike's anymore." And he said, "Well, take off that blue belt. It's disrespectful." That's how I got promoted to purple belt.
Okay.
So again, one of those things. So I never really wanted to compete. It was always just to stay fit. I was too lazy to go to the gym. But I saw what captivated me about jiu-jitsu was the mathematics in jiu-jitsu. And for me, teaching math and imparting that wisdom and logic to people's brains, much like Melissa, we're educators. So we approach jiu-jitsu differently. And Chris, being an artist, gives us the latitude where we can have a pedagogy that will include his creativity and then maybe our scientific approach, right? So that marriage was really good for me and broadened and opened my world and allowed me to look at jiu-jitsu in a different way. So for example, when we start talking about triangles, I start thinking, that acute triangle and obtuse triangle, and looking at angles and 45s and different things. So that began to accelerate my growth in jiu-jitsu. And then, of course, the garage brought so many people, so many friends, and high-level people, low-level people, everybody in between from all over the world. So it's an opportunity to be able to roll as much as I wanted. So on Fridays, I really was getting free privates from a high-level black belt. Rob was with me maybe for a year and a half. We were here Fridays. Then it grew into another day at the garage. And I always had access to Chris and Melissa. So I had that experience where it was just a wonderful, wonderful journey for me. So I really don't have any negative experiences within jiu-jitsu. And I saw the instant philosophy within jiu-jitsu of how I was able to build humility and brotherhood. So I incorporated that into much of the work that I do in gang intervention and gang prevention and with self-esteem building. So I instantly started teaching right away, instantly applying those principles. And I saw a lot of what Jigoro Kano wanted to bring the world when he created the art, or harnessed the art, I should say, and without knowing much of his philosophy. So, we use it deeply in our Rites of Passage program, where we offer free classes in the middle of probably the highest murder rate in our city, where the highest murder rate is. We offer classes there. We've had them in the projects in my hometown in Watts. So we will teach jiu-jitsu anywhere to anyone. We believe that it builds character, self-esteem, and I believe that it prepares the mind to receive mathematics, that they piggyback off of each other.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember in those early days, it's interesting because the Rob he's talking about, 25 years ago, he was LAPD Rampart, and he had lost his badge, and I'd lost mine, and we were kind of, both of us were in a funk when he kind of began his training with me in the garage, and that morning crew, it was all of us that had kind of, most people worked Friday mornings, but for whatever reason, we were training, and then Bond came in, and Chi was coming for a
Yeah,
while.
Chi came right away. Every Friday without fail was me, Chi, and Rob for sure. And I would run over and be the first one here, mop the mats, and be the last one to leave, begging people became my addiction. You gotta roll, give me a roll, so that
And
was
I
it.
always loved how, like, the Jay's one of those rare students that you show him the thing once, and then he retains it for a while, and then the next week he's kind of added his own spin to it, and like it improves on it. He makes it his. And when I use the analogy that, like, but jiu-jitsu is kind of like a music, and most of us are cover bands. Some of us create our own songs. Jay makes his own songs.
Oh,
Thank you,
totally.
Chris.
He
Your
learns the
jujitsu
proper
style's
cover,
amazing.
and then he makes his own song.
Yeah, your jiu-jitsu style is like no one else's. It's extremely unique in my
I'm a
experience.
chubby old school teacher. So I do, I love that creative aspect of jiu-jitsu. And like I said, Chris being an artist, it opened the door to be able to approach jiu-jitsu differently and to be able to do different things. And I had a strong foundation within when I was training with Kaike. Kaike is a wonderful teacher.
Yeah.
His sons are amazing. And
Truly amazing.
and
They're
Friday,
all good.
Pedro would guillotine me and armbar me all Fridays, Friday nights. And in the morning, Rob would choke me out, right? So, and Chris would smash me. So I had these three, like, iconic, high level jujitsu. And one happened to be one of my greatest friends, well, I say one of my greatest blessings that I've met, Chris, there with me, where I could stop by, knock on the door, come in the house and hang out for a while. And most of the time we really rarely talked about our shared love for the art, and probably more about other things. You know what I mean? So,
Philosophy.
That's
and
what Chris
politics.
prefers.
Yeah.
and being a part of watching their children grow up, and them being they're wonderful parents. So being a part of that and watching their children, grow up over the years has been a tremendous blessing for me as well. And waiting to see, what's gonna come from the present and within those children. Each child is a gift, right? And we never know what they're gonna become.
Yep.
So being able to see their children, and their son will call me Papa J. You know what I mean? And because I called him Little Papa since he came out into the world. So, and we could see his athleticism right away. The way he would move. One time he had a broke arm. He was crawling around the entire gym with one arm in a cast. You know what I mean? So just waiting to see what he's gonna do, and the way he thinks, seeing everything all at once. And just seeing that gift within the children and seeing who they are, and having my children be a part, and knowing that they could come and sit on the couch and watch us roll. So Nehemiah, my oldest son, when he first got to the mat, he was trying to drop for footlocks and try to do things that children aren't allowed to do. And I remember him putting a rear naked choke on the Taekwondo teacher, and him almost passing out. So, my kids have been arm barring and choking as long as the Howder children, since they come out the womb. It's just part of our family. If I were to design a family crest, it would be some sort of symbol within our shield that would represent jiu-jitsu. So it's a wonderful way to express my faith as well. It's a way that you can defend yourself without being forced to break someone up or hurt them if you don't want to. And unfortunately, along my journey and the part of the city that I'm in a lot, I've had the misfortune or opportunity, depending on how you see it, to have to use jiu-jitsu in a self-defense manner. And I've never had to hurt someone permanently. So that's a way that, because I'll feel guilty and shameful if I have to hurt somebody. And so when I can stop someone from hurting me and me from hurting them, and be able to walk them into the community center and share a meal with them and wave the cops off, then that's a tremendous, tremendous thing.
I feel like it's interesting because I think most jiu-jitsu teachers have their school and they're like hoping the more reasonably stable people come in to their school as students. But I feel like you're kind of out there actually hoping that the people that are struggling the most are coming to you, and
The
you're
ones
hoping
who
to help those
probably
people.
need it more than the stable, mentally straight student, right?
Right. So I feel like there's more, like you're asking not for trouble, but you're asking for the people that really need help to come your way. So it's a different, do you see what I'm saying? It's a different dynamic for you. And I think that's interesting.
I look at it this way. One of my first martial arts teachers when I was 9 years old, I enrolled under Ron Johnson at a free program at a church and met some of my oldest friends and who I consider brothers. And Ron Johnson would say, life is a struggle for everyone, from the womb to the tomb, from the time you check in to the time you check out. Whether you're white, black, yellow, or purple, life is hard. But if you are alive, you still have a chance. And so that's where we will begin class. And Sensei Skip, who was still a teacher and a mentor and really a father to me, we still have that philosophy. So even when we were here on this block, in one of the most beautiful places on the planet, I found troubled children on this block.
Yep.
And had to intervene and work with those young people in this neighborhood. And one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that Chris has always made it a ministry, I call it. He may not call it that way, but to seek out people who were in pain. So many of the students that we share, so many of our classmates and our peers, without anyone knowing, they have a brokenness within them. And Chris's ministry that he does not talk about or really share is that he's always had this ministry to those people. And so much of what our similarity, and Melissa as well. So it's really what they do together. So, without, sharing anybody's personal business, I know for a fact that they have saved countless lives with the jiu-jitsu and the mentoring that they provided. And maybe at some point people can feel comfortable with expressing those things, but I know it for a fact. One of the things that I had the unique opportunity when I was at Harvard to work with the children of professors, the children of professors, and I worked at the same time at Roxbury in the projects. And I had the same experience when I went to school at Los Angeles Center for Enriched Studies, and I went to Locke High School, which was second from the bottom in the nation, right? So in Watts in West LA. So God has always had me in this duality, right? So I could see both sides or see what people call, I guess, underprivileged or whatever name we put on people. And you can't tell by income level because you may go to a home where they have everything, but they don't have love. You may go to a home that has no funding, but they have so much love that these kids aren't at risk for anything but becoming great people. So my home was like that. We didn't have the funds. My mother took in everyone. We probably would have had enough funds to move if she didn't share the pot and cut it up so much. So our house was large enough that when they bought the house, the home was owned by black firemen during segregated LA. So it was a huge house. He did it real nice. It was just in Watts. And so when the crack epidemic came, everything changed. We went from I didn't have keys to my home until crack came. I didn't need keys. I walked in the door, opened the door, we walked in. We didn't lock our doors. We didn't have bars on the windows. It was a small southern town, pretty much. So it was like being in Alabama, being in Louisiana. That's where everybody was from anyway. Texas, Arkansas, and so forth. So when crack hit, everything changed. But the love within my home never changed. So I never saw my mother take a drink, never saw her smoke a cigarette, use profanity. That's how I was inside my house. Now, when I got outside, during that elementary school experience, I may have lost 40 people from my elementary school that were violently murdered as we grew up. So the violence was there. I lost my first best friend when I was 8 or 9 years old when he was murdered along with his entire family. Wow. His uncle was Kermit Alexander, right, who was a famous athlete that played football from my hometown of Watts. So when he was murdered, that was my first introduction to death, not through a pet or, a fish or a dog. It was through the murder of a close friend. And so by 5th grade, I saw multiple homicides, and I received my first gun in 6th grade when a young man pulled it out on me and threatened me, and I took the gun. And that's how I got my first pistol. So that was in 6th grade at 99th Elementary School. So it was a wonderful school with wonderful teachers, but the world around us was falling down. And so when I mention all that to say that when the kids that I work with, they wear labels, but you don't know who they are or what they experience until you get to know them. So the same is true for affluent areas. You can't tell by looking at race, gender. You can't tell. You can't see the person. You got to get to know them. And then you can see where the brokenness is, and then you can see how you might heal it. And so it's a paradox of my faith that broken people help broken people, right?
100%.
And so some people in the 12-step program would understand that, right? That in order to address a certain sort of pain, you have to go through that pain. And you have a rapport for it. You have some understanding, and your humanity will grow, and you'll be able to share and give to that person. But I have taught gang members. I've taught people from all walks of life. I've taught yoga instructors. I've taught everything. But the one unique thing about the community center, one of my greatest gifts is has been a student by the name of Cedric, who the Howders will tell you that we all love Ced, right? And in the neighborhood, Ced had this reputation, and I was like, yeah, okay, tough guy, and but I could sense
he does
this.
look tough, though.
Yeah.
I mean, when he walks in here, he's humble, but like I could picture how in his element, he would be a guy that someone would want to start shit with or would avoid.
Yeah. And in that world, most people chose to avoid, and his reputation would precede him. And I figured that out when I had some high-ranking LAPD officers, and he came. I asked James, who had hired him. James Bond had hired him at Undefeated, and I asked him, bring him by. I'm gonna send back some food for the guys. And the cops knew who he was. I just called his name, TPG, and they were like, "Is that him?" And I was like, "Oh, sorry, what I mean? Cedric." and over the years, he's become another person, and the same person that I saw, but another person to other people, and opened the door for a lot of people in the community who would not have trained to want to train. So he's been like a magnet for people who, oh, you do that karate jiu-jitsu stuff. Oh yeah, let me come by. See me in the stores. They'll see me walking around the community center, and because they know Cedric, our tiny Bogart, they will be more open to receive my wisdom, whatever I have to give. And they've saw, parents and grandparents have seen how he's transformed his life, and they may think that I had something to do with that, which I know that is God. Only God could do what has been done within that young man. But we've been able to build rapport and add him to our family. And within our jiu-jitsu circle, James and Rob, another Rob, they saw the goodness in him and they wanted to help. And I remember one day on the mat at Undefeated, James comes up and says, is Cedric working? And I said, no. And he said, can I hire him? I said, please. And I said, the tattoos, you okay with the tattoos? Everybody got
It's
tattoos.
the look.
James had the tattoos. I was like, yeah, but yours don't say what his say. And where I come from, we look, we read, right? You know what I mean? And James gave him an opportunity. And now, I tell you, I kid you not, the entire neighborhood, you'll see young men and you'll see the Undefeated symbol.
Yeah.
And it's not because Undefeated is dope, fashionable, beautiful brand. And but I think it's more so because of the advertisement. And I'm sure most people assume that the only gis that are made are Undefeated or combat based. You know what I mean? Those are the only gis, right? You know what I mean? Because they see us in the gis. But it's been a wonderful opportunity to open the door to a whole new population that would have never, otherwise there's no jiu-jitsu schools there. There's no jiu-jitsu schools. And one of the greatest gifts has been from Grandmaster Horion Gracie, where he donated maybe 200 gis. I can't even tell you how many. Too many, more than we need. And then you've donated judo gis. You've bought us maybe 2 or 3 boxes. Melissa's always giving me gis. So one of the things that we always have is, they come in, oh, we got a gi for you, right? And so we can start their journey right away. So one of the greatest pictures that I have is of Cedric and I several years ago in the parking lot at Avalon Carver, footsteps away from where I've seen maybe 4 homicides, standing in the parking lot with him holding up his first gi, right, in the parking lot. And he didn't know what that was going to mean, but I knew, and you could see my face. Oh boy, you're about to change, right? This is about to change you, right? And so that journey, everybody evolves and changes through jiu-jitsu. And you really get to see what's inside of a person through the way that they express the art. So everybody has a different expression, right? So you'll see Melissa's gentleness and her toughness.
I don't know about gentleness.
Yeah. So
Tiger style.
like you'll see her.
Ask Tobin, he's scared of me.
You'll see her moving, and then all of a sudden it's like a, right?
Tiger style.
Like you might get broke. You know what I mean? Like you better tap, right? You know what I mean? So you can see that, right? And you see Chris's creativity and his games, and he's playing, right? And you see, and always Tobin has we tell jokes about a story when Tobin brought someone to his home. We met at Tobin's house doing jiu-jitsu, and he had never known me
In
before.
Pedro.
Yeah.
No, we met one time before at a smoothie shop.
Okay, at a smoothie shop.
Smoothie shop.
That's right. He had on a jiu-jitsu shirt.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, you train jiu-jitsu? And Tobin was like, yeah, I train. You know, and that was the first place we met.
Yeah.
That's true.
And then you're the first one to bring Tobin over here, right?
I actually came
Dylan.
many years ago, one time before.
I just don't remember
Dylan.
that.
Jay
But I really-
mentioned
Oh,
it.
Dylan?
And
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it
But either
was.
case,
So
yeah.
Dylan reintroduced me to Tobin. Right. And so I showed up at his, in his house during COVID with my son, my oldest nephew, and my second oldest nephew. And we walk in, and all of a sudden we're family. And with my oldest friend, and they all love Tobin. Everybody loves Tobin. And
he's hard not to love.
yeah. So they tell a story about, I can't see when I train at all. So I'm blind as a bat. And they tell a story about Tobin wanting me to roll with this guy. And, you have not rolled with Jay yet. Oh, don't let me stop you. Roll with Jay. You know what I mean? And of course I can't see that no one else is rolling. Everybody just watching me roll with this guy. And Tobin's such a nice guy, but he has this inner killer in him that nobody knows about. You know what I mean?
I know about it.
He's looking for that opportunity.
I know about it. Yep.
So he's there, and for whatever reason, I think he wanted this guy to learn a different sort of lesson that day.
Some help on the mat. Reinforcements.
He wanted to, because I could tell the guy was like, "Oh, you're Jay." And so I was like, yeah, I've told you about Jay. I've told you about Chris and Vaughn, right? No, he's told me something different about this guy. It's like one of those martial arts movies.
Yeah.
Who is your master, right? You know what I mean? And so, I can't see what's going on. And maybe about 3 or 4 seconds in a row, the guy screams, ah, you know what I mean? And I'm like, oh, sorry, wrist lock, you know what I mean? And then he grabs me again, and he screams again, and he's rolling. And then he's like, yes, professor. You know what I mean? And it was like and I could see, this is what Tobin wanted. You know what I mean? And then everybody tells me their version afterwards. We were looking, what's going to happen? It's going to a mat bully kind of guy, but a really nice guy.
Yeah.
But that's Tobin for me, where he has this side of him where, well, let me see you get smashed, and I'm not gonna feel sorry for you. You know what I mean? And no one knows because he carries himself as such a warm, and he's a family man. Has a wonderful wife and wonderful sons, and he carries himself that way. So no one would suspect inside. He really is looking for the opportunity to choke you out, right? You know what I mean? And, that's it.
You're kind of that way. But too, Jay.
Yeah, but everybody
the way you
is,
carry
though.
yourself. Yeah.
The thing is like what you were talking about. When people walk into the gym, nobody really knows somebody's story. That guy could be a mass murderer for all they know. We don't know, and everybody's got demons in every demographic, and
People are more alike than they are different.
and also
Jean-Jacques Rousseau.
so many people that are attracted to jiu-jitsu have to have that little inner angst, that little inner, I don't know if it's deviousness or what devious or what there's so many people that I know in jiu-jitsu that are struggling with depression, anxiety, substance abuse, all these different things, and maybe they have worked it out and used jiu-jitsu as part of their healing.
That's it.
But there's always something. I rarely meet somebody that just has it all together once you really know.
Otherwise,
and maybe everybody just has something, right?
That's what it
Everybody
is.
in the world
Everybody
just has something.
is going through something.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has something to work out.
Yeah.
But in jiu-jitsu, you have to trust your training partners. So the part that you hide at work or even at home gets expressed on the mat. So I've been in this room where I've been alone with someone in tears that is bearing their soul, during cleanup, right?
Yep.
And this is the thing, that when you're allowing somebody to do something that would kill you, they're choking you. If they continue, you'll die, right? So you trust this person, and they trust you. You know that as soon as they touch you, that they're gonna stop. You know that if they put you to sleep, they'll wake you up.
It builds
right?
trust. Yep.
So the trust that is being built, that rapport that's being built, you get closer to people than you might normally get that you get closer faster than it would in another environment.
And rubbing your bodies on each other.
Yeah.
It's a thing. I've talked about it before. There's a lot of hormones that are produced by doing that.
And
It's
you
like
know,
a physical, emotional, complete bonding. And yeah, who knows who's at that gym sometimes. So for me, it produced a lot of anxiety. Like, I want to be able to trust this person before I roll with them.
Absolutely.
And in the early 80s, I was thinking about how from the more affluent areas, the quote unquote fucked up kids gravitated to the world of punk rock, which is what I was kind of in. And I knew kids from very brutal backgrounds and broken homes, even some who lived on the beach strand.
Manhattan Beach was a mess when Chris was growing up.
It was kind of a
It
mess.
was a mess.
And
Not anymore.
right when punk rock and hip hop were underground, and the punk shows would be in LA areas, and I remember when crack first kind of hit, and I didn't know what crack was. I'm not going to tell you my first crack story, but I kind of will. And I had no idea. I'd heard about it. I'd snorted cocaine, whatever, and I remember realizing that now I could see why this was going to change the streets. And I remember, like, years after, I was speaking with an old junkie and saying that, back when it was just heroin, there were rules to the street. But when crack came, all the rules
Everything
went out.
changed.
Everything changed. It's a drug that, like, can take the nicest person and turn them into a lying demon.
Now, as I remember when crystal meth really started to get into the hood, I remember Rob actually saying, telling me an incident that he saw with people who were high on crystal meth downtown, working a job, and I remember what he described. It was like like crack.
Yeah.
And he said, but
it lasts longer.
and it's doing it faster.
It lasts longer.
So the damage that crack would cause in a short period of time, crystal meth is causing in a shorter period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm noticing kids, wonderful young people that in the shelter at our center, Home at Last operates a shelter out of Avalon Carver, one of my dear friends, Mike, the Young family. So within that shelter that we built there, I see young people that I thought were smoking marijuana. And marijuana's always been a thing, right? But this marijuana is not the marijuana of their grandparents. No. This is a different marijuana. And I find out that they're lacing the marijuana with fentanyl.
Yeah. Oh,
God.
And this is something that when I was a young person, I guess most of us grew up with older people in our lives that were on crack. So nobody wanted to be a crackhead.
Yeah.
Marijuana, alcohol was prevalent amongst African American youth, and that was it. Some of our brown brothers that were gangbanging, they would break up crack and put it inside of blunts, and they would call it P-Dogs. Then you have some hardcore Crips in the neighborhood and Bloods that would smoke Sherm or embalming fluid. But most people, stayed away, right? So now when I watch these young people popping pills, smoking fentanyl, marijuana, drinking, living in alleys, it's like a combination of the crackheads that I grew up with and then the pill poppers and the heroin addicts that were hippies and kind of fringe society combined.
Yeah.
So
it's kind of weird. An old joke we used to have, I heard it both in rehabs and as a cop, is your alcoholic cousin will come over at 3 a.m, knock on your door, pass out on the porch because you need some money. Your heroin addict cousin will come over at 4 a.m, sneak in a window, steal $20 and leave you a note. Your crack addict cousin will be over at 6 a.m, steal everything you have. Your meth addict one will plan for 3 weeks, steal everything, and then help you catch the guy who did it.
And pull out the wiring of the house, right? And the copper pipes, you know what I mean? So we're, in our diverse area, we're receiving people from all over. When I say from all over, from Central America, all the way from Florida, New York, all races, right? All ethnic groups, all languages are coming right here to the center of South Central, Barry White's hometown, South Park. They're coming right there, and the rules are growing gray.
Yeah. I don't think
And
there are rules anymore.
no,
I don't know if it's the internet, the youth, the dope, but yeah, everything has atomized.
and at the same time, they're really politically correct. You know what I mean? So it's open. There's not of there's no the even the young people that are popping pills and they're drug addicts and they're breaking into cars around the center, they will respect, trans relation, trans people. They will respect races. They will respect ethnic groups. Everything else will be respected. So it's a unique thing with our young people. I see a hope within them,
Yep.
and I also see, just a fear that I have. I have a hope in them and I have a fear for them.
Yeah.
And not that they're going to do something to me, but what they're going to do to themselves.
Yep.
So our young people are lost. And what was a problem for African American people in the inner cities in the 80s is now a problem for our country. It brings to mind to me of what Malcolm X said, the chickens have come home to roost. And so what was meant to destroy or stop the growth of the civil rights movement and what was going to come from the civil rights movement, what was going to make a better America, now is being used to destroy America.
And that movement was literally killed off. Anyone who's interested in history, study the year 1968, and you can see how an entire generation of leaders were murdered.
Oh, I see right in my neighborhood, in my childhood, when I tell you, we didn't lock our doors in the center of Los Angeles. And within a year or two, we could not play in the front yard. I remember
Because of the drive-bys.
yes,
Yeah.
the early part of my childhood was breakdancing on
Yeah.
cardboard in front of the house.
Yeah.
And everybody on the entire block knew who I was.
1979, 80, that would start. Yeah.
Man, now watch this. By the time towards my teenage years, really still in elementary, we had 3 crack houses on my block. And there's only one other house that has a male in it that has not been shot, killed, or incarcerated on my entire block. So when you think about it that way, the next one is Grady Williams, who's a professor, right? Then there's me. Every other house has been visited with intense violence. And if it wasn't for the grace of God and miracles performed, I definitely would have been gone.
Yeah.
So even past elementary, I know that there's been miracles that have been performed on my behalf just to get me to be alive. So it grew so violent. You're talking about a place where I would literally jump the gate, walk over to Miss Williams' house, and just crawl over the fence, open the door and yell, "Grady, come outside and play." And then we would start shooting hoops. I would be shooting hoops, maybe get some orange juice. That was our lives. We, freeze tag, water fights in the front yard. And then all of a sudden, we couldn't play in the front yard. Jumping over cars, bullets ricocheting off the walls.
Sleeping in the bathtub.
All of that type of stuff. So, my little brother, Albert Brady, born drug exposed, shot in the head on Central and Rosecrans, foster care all of his life. Just the violence that was inflicted upon him. And then you see miracles. And you find out that this guy now helps to manage shelters for homeless college students and saved 64 American soldiers in Iraq, received a Bronze Star, 2 Army commendations, right? Saved 6 Iraqi police officers, been blown up 3 times, and teaches science for me and still teaches kids during the water dance. And he's this 6'4" mountain of a man that has this incredible smile. And if it weren't for miracles and intervention in his life, Ron Johnson used martial arts when he was a child. If it wasn't for people that God put in his life, he would have still been banging Pyru, and that would have been it. Now he's a Morehouse man, Harvard man, and he graduated from Columbia. And one of the things that I told him when he could not add fractions was that when you make this decision to go to Columbia, it's going to change your family tree. Now he has a niece that's graduated Columbia, right? So for me, this jiu-jitsu component with what I teach with math and career prep and so forth is a wonderful way to build soft skills, to get people used to interacting with people outside of their circles. So, if you're, some guy who from Manhattan Beach who hasn't interacted with any black guys, now you got a black training partner that your kids like, right? You know what I mean? And then you have, your black guy like Cedric from the hood. Now you got James Bond, who owns a huge company, who's your friend, who literally James put Cedric's words on the wall in his store in China, right? And put his quote on the wall with his name, Cedric, right? So now they're buddies. So this is what jiu-jitsu can do. It can make people more human, more approachable. So to Melissa's point earlier, I don't think that it's just that a certain type of person is attracted to jiu-jitsu. It's just they're revealed.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's broken. Everybody's hurting. And the vulnerableness of jiu-jitsu, the learning of humility, is what allows you to feel comfortable enough to expose yourself.
Yeah.
And that's part of what we did through our gang initiation when we were kids, and when we were getting initiated into the gang, you had to fight. And you had to learn to be courageous when it was done correctly, learn to be courageous and learn to be humble and learn some temperance that you didn't finish the fight. Of course, with crack and with all those things,
And guns.
that got distorted, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the ugliness just flourished, and it was no longer a rites of passage, if you will. It was a way to abuse children.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, that fighting, that putting your life in someone else's hands, that teaches you respect for life. It teaches you that one false move can break someone's arm. It can collapse someone's artery in their neck and crush a trachea. Do the choke correctly. Don't do it to crush his windpipe, right? So you learn temperance. You learn humility. You learn to be kind. You learn to be trusting. You learn to give a little bit. One of the things that Chris would do, he would roll with people and then give them a hard roll, and then next thing you know, they do really good the next day. And in their mind, wow, almost got close. Almost tapped out the legendary Chris Howder, right? They don't know that he's giving it to them. That he's giving them a little edge. That he likes what they're doing, so he's giving them a little bit.
You do the same thing.
Yeah, I do. That's where I learned
I've seen you do that before.
Yeah, right. And that causes people, it builds self-esteem, it builds confidence, and it allows people to take risks that they wouldn't take. They're not just so tight now; they're going to go for that armbar, right? So again, it's not you being an egomaniac. I'm not going to let anybody tap me out, right? You know what I mean? It's learning to be a friend.
Yeah, I think a lot of the really high level martial artists that I've trained with do that exact same thing. They feed people enough to make them feel good about themselves and about their experience. Most of the high level guys don't just dominate whoever they can whenever they can. So it's you do that. You do that.
I think, in the early days, and this does come out of an honor culture. You did not let people ever not get your A game when I was first coming up. And then I think that kind of changed by around 92, 94-ish.
But also there's a level of, I think, maturity. So we're talking about a whole different demographic that's training. It wasn't Professor J, teacher. It was, right? Not that you're not a tough guy, but you were already a dad and stuff like that, right? When you were training before, it was all these young, muscly
guys who want to fight.
Jerks.
And,
young. Immature. There was more immaturity at the time. You would get beat up. So that was even a comment I saw on one of the posts that, who's enforcing this rule of you're going to get beat up if you taught outside of the garage? You know what I mean? That's immature, isn't it?
It is, but that's
getting beat up if you share the martial art. You're going to get beat up. you wouldn't be allowed to do what you're doing. We wouldn't be allowed to do what we're doing because you had to keep it in with your higher ups.
And that's kind of when now that other cultures and other people are embraced, and I come from an era where I will show you another side if you threaten me, and if I feel threatened, and it's not gonna work out well for either of us if those type of things are imposed upon me. So I think that it was good that I started training when I did.
Me too, because I wouldn't have been allowed. I wouldn't have been allowed, right? My friend showed up at one of the main places one time with her husband, and she was sent to one room, and he got to go to the other room. She didn't want to go to that room that they made her go to because she was a woman. So, anyways, the pink belt room.
Yeah, for me, I didn't, it's what you're looking for. So I didn't come to jiu-jitsu to learn how to fight. I felt like when I arrived at jiu-jitsu, I already knew enough to survive. By that point, I think I had been shot at maybe in three states. I had fights in maybe 4 or 5 states. I had been in some dangerous situations.
You wanted to learn the art.
I wanted to lose weight.
You wanted to lose weight. He said that.
I wanted to get in shape.
I wanted to let my aggression out. That's what I wanted to do because
Yeah.
I was angry and I was overweight too, and I was a smoker.
Yeah.
I had all kinds of problems, and I thought, oh, that
wanted
looks
to
cool.
exercise.
I can just let my aggression out.
Yeah.
And
So
then I learned along the way.
I remember that first competition class, I threw somebody, and it wasn't like a big deal to me. I've always been, I'm a nerdy guy, but I have another side of me as well. So, sometimes, for me, it was like, oh, this is good. I get to be aggressive. That's why I love training with Chi. You roll with different people different ways. So Chi would always roll, you don't have to apologize if a head hits you in the face or, or a knee drops you in the groin. Chi would just keep rolling. We would just roll. And so Chi became really like, he's always been like my twin brother on the mat. You know what I mean? Like it would just be, we would always be rolling all over the mat. You know what I mean? And calm down, other people are here. You know what I mean? And so you always have those relationships with different people on the mat. And those expressions of your side, you get to express yourself as a part of femininity that is usually unwelcomed. You know what I mean? That strength, that power. You get to let that out. So for me, I think that there's no better population. I love girls to get involved in jiu-jitsu and judo, right? There's no other way to build better self-esteem in this population than showing them that they can throw a man. For me, that's girl power. That builds self-esteem. Like math and science, most of the girls that I work with, they know that they can become doctors, they become attorneys. They know that already because they've seen women break that ceiling. Melissa is a graduate of UCLA. She has a science degree, right? She's already well educated, right? So that she didn't need to learn that type of self-esteem from jiu-jitsu. But to be able to strangle someone unconscious, that does something for you, to know that you can defend yourself. So for me, I didn't approach jiu-jitsu for that because the neighborhood taught me that, right? My block was like Sparta. We always fought. That was just how it always was. And nobody ever ran home and told on each other. That's just what we did on the playground. That was that era. It was traditional American values in my neighborhood. So if you had a problem, you could leave the problem right there on the concrete. So I came to jiu-jitsu for another reason. And I found what I was looking for in jiu-jitsu. The first 6 months, I dropped 70 pounds. So, you know what I mean? And then I met a bunch of friends and I had such a good relationship with both of my instructors in jiu-jitsu, with Master Kaike, with Chris. So, it was always a friendship. And of course, Chris became a brother to me very quickly. Like I said, like I work philosophy, that's most of our conversations. And I always joke and I always say, Chris sends me my information, make sure that I'm up to date, on party politics, right? And
Love it.
so Chris is, I can always, if someone presented me with a question, how is Chris going to vote this way or this way? I already know. You know what I mean? Over the years, I know exactly what his opinion is going to be on a certain topic, right? And he doesn't make any, he doesn't ask for forgiveness about that. And so I've seen Chris pushing the limits with people in the garage and using me often to do that. You know what I mean? Like, say it now, Jay's. Oh, you won't say it because Jay's here. You know what I mean? Yeah. Where's that black joke? You know what I mean? And, you know what I mean? So I could see that. Or tell your Christian brother now, Jay. Why do you drive the minivan or the station wagon? You know what I mean? I remember that's a true story, by the way. And you know, how many times have you been pulled over? You know what I mean? Things that make me blush. You know what I mean? But Chris is going to put that in the forefront because he really is, social justice is important to him. I think that will eclipse his passion and love for jiu-jitsu. And often, you know, I say it like this, jiu-jitsu is like eating. It's something that we just have to do, right? But the social justice and the choice part is something that we choose to do.
Somehow on the mat, I was just kind of laughing inside, thinking about there was like 3 cops, a couple right-wing lawyers, a full-on leftist socialist. Everyone's rolling together and laughing and enjoying. I'm like,
That's
wow.
the best.
But jiu-jitsu really does solve social problems.
Sounds like our life.
When Cedric got his blue belt, the first person to embrace him while he was crying, you know, he was a little overwhelmed, was an officer. I don't know if he knew he was an officer, but he was an African American cop. I call him judo cop, and I met Officer Tabron Lee, through Chris, right? So that's who introduced me to Chris, where we have a role with cops in the community at our center is through a relationship that I built with a close friend now through Chris. Over the phone. Yeah. So, and it's African American men that get together, and women and their kids come and they roll once a month. We call it the soul roll. And I came in contact with these other African American men through my brother Chris. That's how it happened.
Yeah, and I think it's like one of those things I'll often hear from one side of the camp that's like really mad at cops. Like, why do you want to train cops and give them any more ability to do it? It's like, no, you exactly want
Teach
to
them
train
how
cops.
to be
Or
safe.
why do you want to train these potential
Confidence.
gangsters and criminals? Because that's exactly what will keep them from doing dumb shit.
Because they learn that we're respectful. We're not going to use this stuff. We know how to do it. We're going to use it for defense. This isn't to mess people up.
You know, I've trained with guys that have been special forces and SEAL team and all sorts of things. And everybody, I don't know if most people will know Chris's background, but he's a military guy too, right? And I know that all these guys know how to defend themselves, much like most gang members.
Yep.
They know how to defend themselves.
They grew up
and
themselves.
they, you know, I think one of the people that I mentioned earlier, he may have had 80 fights in the park. You know what I mean? Like a lot of fights. And these special forces guys have had fights. So we're not coming here to learn or to fight. It's for me, it's always been like chess or dominoes or a math equation, you know, a fun puzzle to solve. How do we get out of this? How do we create this? And I really think that the process of learning how to maximize efficiency, right, for the mutual benefit, Jiro Kano's words, those 2 pillars of judo, that in that there's these inherent lessons that teach you to value life. And it teaches you to be patient. It teaches you to be long-suffering. It teaches you delayed gratification, right? Yeah. So those things are just embedded within the practices, within the training, within the principles. And so when we give it to cops, you may have a guy that's a cop, wanted to be a tough guy his whole life and never had a fight. You don't need him on the streets like that. He needs to be physical. He needs to get to know what it is when someone is truly resisting or when they're just protesting the arrest.
That's right.
And that was one of the things that Rob, you know, one of my first instructors under Chris Howder, taught me about officers that they don't know. And I was like, oh, that's why they're always feeling like they're
Puffing it up.
Yeah, they don't know they're not really fighting back. You know what I mean? So they need to know that.
Brief experience as a cop, there would be a certain kind of cop that would think that when a person was fighting the arrest. They were fighting you. And it's like, no, they're not fighting you.
No.
They're fighting the arrest.
Trying to get
So
away.
When they
protest.
fight you, you'll know it.
Yeah.
Now your
it's
life
a
is
whole
in jeopardy.
I've
different
tried to
world.
get
Yep.
away from a cop or two.
So that's a protest, right?
Yep,
That's a protest.
That's right.
Yep.
I don't want to be arrested.
Yeah. So they're like, oh, get your hands off of me, you effing pig, or whatever they're saying, right? And it's just protesting that they feel that they've been done unjustly.
Yeah.
But if they were fighting, there'd be some, it's going to look and feel a lot different.
It's a different
So the
world.
other thing that it does for people in the community to get the cops together with people in the community is you get to build that old school, kind of relationship with the officers, and where the people can realize that officers are people too, right?
We're all the same.
We all struggle,
We all struggle, yeah.
right? From the womb to the tomb, from the time you check in to the time you check out. But if you are alive, you still have a chance. That's what we teach all our kids.
It's a beautiful spot to end the podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotta wrap
We don't
it
have
up.
unlimited time, unfortunately. I wish maybe someday you come back for a round 2, but
Yep.
I think to wrap it up, I would just want to say thanks so much for being you, first of all, and for your work. I think, like Chris said at the beginning, you are kind of like an angel type character. And for me personally, you came into my life at a time where I was actually considering quitting jiu-jitsu. I had it was a COVID time, real tough time for everybody in jiu-jitsu. I was training out of my backyard, which was a cool training time, but there was
great.
a lot of thoughts about quitting jiu-jitsu during that time. And you came in and like really helped me keep it going. And you've been like an awesome teacher for me, but just who you are as a person, the way you treat people, the way you handle yourself with people, you're just somebody to look up to. So I really appreciated that always. And
Thank you.
Yeah. And you do that for everybody. So I know other people think that same thing.
Yep.
And thanks for coming to support our podcast. We appreciate it.
Always.
Yeah, thank
yeah.
you, Jay.
Yep. Jay, thanks. And yep, I always say you got a heart of gold. It's like there's people that that gets tossed around a lot, but Jay truly has a heart of gold.
Thank you, Chris. That means a lot to me. I don't always feel that way. So thank you.
Pound that like button and subscribe.
Oh, yeah.